Who rules us from behind the scenes? Let's talk about what is called the New World Order. There is an opinion that behind all the events in the world there is some secret force that no one really sees. They call it a shadow government. A bunch of rich and powerful people who decide everything for us, and we just follow their orders. Sounds a bit like the plot of a disaster movie, doesn't it? The idea started back at the beginning of the last century, when countries were trying to find ways to live together after the First World War. The thought then was to create some kind of common structure, like the League of Nations or the UN, to make everyone live better and safer. But over time, the term came to mean something else. Now the New World Order is associated with the fact that there is a group of people who control all politics, economics, and media while remaining in the shadows. People who believe in this theory make different arguments. For example, they say that most of the money in the world is controlled by a few large companies and banks. These companies can dictate terms to governments and change the direction of the economy in their favor. They also mention closed meetings, like those held at the Bilderberg Club or the Trilateral Commission, where the most powerful people in the world supposedly gather and decide where the world should go from here. They also talk about control over information. They say that the big media also belong to this group of people, and they decide what to show to the people and what not to show. All this is done to maintain a certain way of thinking and block any attempts to change something. Then, of course, there's globalization. As economics and culture become more interconnected, some see this as an attempt to create a one-world order run by the same shadowy group. Of course, there are skeptics, too. They say there is no direct evidence of such a shadow government. And in general, it is too difficult to imagine that so many different people with different interests will be able to agree and work together for one goal. Besides, in democracies, people can choose their own leaders and influence decision-making. So it is unlikely that there could be some secret government that runs everything. As for the possible consequences, if suddenly it turns out that this theory is true, well, there are a lot of unpleasant things. First, the gap between rich and poor will widen. Second, they'll start restricting our rights and freedoms to keep control. And third, it could lead to social riots and conflict because people won't like being ruled from behind the scenes. The city slept, shrouded in a dense shroud of fog. Only sparse streetlights illuminated the deserted streets, casting a dim light on the wet asphalt. One of the old buildings, hidden deep in the alleys, housed the headquarters of the shadowy organization known as them. Inside the building there was silence, broken only by the quiet hum of computers and the whispers of a few people gathered in a spacious hall. In the center of the room was a long table where the members of the Oni Council sat. Each of them was dressed in a strict suit, their faces hidden under hoods. "We must speed up the process," said one of the council members, whose voice sounded hoarse and low. "Time is running out. A new world order is already taking shape, and we cannot afford to fall behind." "I agree," replied another council member. "Our agents are already embedded in key points of power around the world. We control the biggest banks, media corporations, and political parties. All that's left is to push things in the right direction." "How is the digital control project coming along?" asked the third council member, looking at the computer screen in front of him. "Everything is going according to plan," replied the fourth council member. "Big data and algorithms are already working for us. We know what each person thinks, what they buy, who they talk to. Soon we will be able to completely control their behavior." "Excellent," nodded the first council member. "What about the economic bloc?" "Our corporations continue to grow, absorbing our competitors," answered the fifth council member. "We are strengthening our influence in every country. International agreements and alliances are working in our favor. Good, said the sixth member of the council. But don't forget the climate factor. The environment is a powerful tool of pressure. We must use it to force countries to follow our rules. We are already working on it, confirmed the seventh member. The Paris Agreement is just the beginning. We will promote sustainable development and green energy to strengthen our control over natural resources. What about the pandemic? Asked the eighth member of the council. It has helped us make significant progress, but now we need to build on that success. We continue to develop biosecurity, replied the ninth member. New vaccines and diagnostic methods will allow us to monitor the health of the population, and therefore their behavior. Excellent, concluded the first council member. All the elements of the New World Order are gradually coming together. Our work is nearing completion. Soon the whole world will be under our control. The council members exchanged glances of determination and confidence. None of them doubted success. After all, they knew they had centuries of planning and preparation behind them. A new world order was inevitable. Now let me tell you about current trends that may hint at the emergence of a new world order. These are some pretty interesting things. Online shopping, financial applications, and cryptocurrencies have become an integral part of our lives. This is changing the usual patterns of banks and governments. Big data and smart programs help predict and manage our behavior. That's why you're constantly being offered products you've only thought of buying. Things around us are starting to think for themselves. Imagine a refrigerator that orders groceries when they run out. The biggest companies are getting even bigger, buying smaller firms and expanding their influence. Giants like Google and Amazon dictate the rules of the game. These corporations influence laws in different countries to make it easier to do business. Gradually, laws are being harmonized, and this sets the stage for a common legal framework. The EU, NAFTA, and other associations show that countries want to work together. This makes trade, investment, and movement of people easier. The Paris Climate Agreement and similar initiatives show that countries are willing to work together to save the planet. This can lead to more control over natural resources. Authoritarian regimes are on the rise in some countries, increasing control over the population. Democracy is receding and power is being concentrated in some hands. Populist leaders promise easy ways out of crises. This attracts people but can weaken democratic institutions. Conflicts over territory, as in the South China Sea, show that the balance of power in the world is shifting. New alliances like the SCO are emerging in response to old Western blocs. Fighting climate change is becoming a priority. Companies and countries are switching to green energy sources and rethinking approaches to production. The shift away from oil and gas in favor of solar and wind is changing the balance of power in the world. Women, minorities, and other groups are demanding equal rights. This affects social structure and cultural norms. Western values spread through media and technology, blurring national identities. The pandemic has shown how important international cooperation in public health is. Global systems for monitoring and responding to disease may emerge in the future. Biological safety is becoming more important than ever. New methods of diagnosis and treatment may become the basis for a global medical system. All these trends show that the world is becoming more connected, but also more complex. Many factors need to be considered to understand where we are headed. After the meeting, the council members went about their business, leaving the room empty and plunged into darkness. Only the faint lights of the monitors continued to burn, like a reminder of the invisible presence of they. The next day, the city woke up as usual, unaware of what was going on behind the scenes. People rushed to work, children went to school, stores opened, and life went on as usual. But underneath this seeming ordinariness, important changes were taking place. In the office of a large financial corporation, the heads of departments were gathered. One of them, a tall man in an expensive suit, opened the meeting with the words, "Colleagues, today we will discuss our strategy for future growth. Our influence in the economy continues to grow, and this opens up new opportunities for us. We must make the most of them." "I absolutely agree," his colleagues supported him. "We need to continue to buy shares in key companies and integrate ourselves into their business processes. This will allow us to control the markets and dictate our own terms." In addition, added the third participant in the meeting, we need to intensify our efforts in digital technology. Big data and algorithms are the future. We must be ahead of the curve in this race. I suggest investing in the development of new applications and platforms, suggested the fourth department head. This will help us gather even more information about consumers and influence their choices. "That's a great idea," endorsed the general manager. "Let's start by developing a new financial app. It will offer users personalized services and recommendations based on the analysis of their behavior." The meeting continued, and each of the participants made suggestions. Soon the action plan was approved and the departments got to work. The financial corporation began to implement its strategy, quietly embedding itself into the daily lives of millions of people. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, in the building of a large media holding company, another meeting was taking place. The head of the news department had gathered journalists and editors to discuss future editorial policy. "Colleagues," he began, "our task is to shape public opinion. We must emphasize events and topics that are in the interests of our sponsors." "Of course," agreed one of the journalists. "We are already working on a series of stories about the benefits of the digital economy and the importance of going green." "That's great," praised the editor. "Keep up the good work. Don't forget to mention how new technologies will improve quality of life and safety." "What about political news?" a young journalist asked. "What topics should be covered?" "Politics is always a sensitive subject," the editor replied. "We should support those candidates and parties that are loyal to our interests. Emphasize their successes and ignore their mistakes." "I see," the girl nodded. "I will start preparing materials about the latest initiatives of our candidate." The meeting ended and the journalists returned to their workplaces. Each of them knew that their articles and reports would be thoroughly checked and corrected in order to comply with the general line of the holding. Meanwhile, a meeting was taking place at the headquarters of an international environmental organization. The participants were discussing plans to promote the ideas of sustainable development and green energy. "Friends," addressed the chairman of the meeting, "we must increase pressure on governments and corporations. They need to realize that protecting nature is not just a fashion trend, but a vital necessity." "Absolutely right," the woman with glasses supported him. "We should organize a series of protests and social media campaigns. This will attract public attention and force the authorities to make the right decisions. Besides," added the young specialist, "we should propose specific projects and initiatives. For example, the creation of new parks and reserves, the introduction of environmentally friendly technologies and industry." "Great ideas," approved the chairman. "Let's draw up an action plan and start implementation. Time is of the essence." The meeting was over and the participants left, ready to start accomplishing their tasks. They had no idea that their activities were part of a larger plan developed by they. So, step by step, they were approaching their goal. The New World Order was getting closer and closer, and no one could stop this process. The city lived its life, not knowing that soon everything would change forever.